Stop scrolling. Because what people think they know about Teyana Taylor and Aaron Pierre just took a sharp turn that has the internet split straight down the middle. What started as a quiet breakup has now been repackaged online into something far more explosive: the claim that Aaron Pierre allegedly walked away from Teyana Taylor for a white woman, and that Teyana didn't take it quietly. Now, before anyone jumps to conclusions, let's be clear. There is no confirmed proof, no official statements, and no verified timeline that supports this claim as fact. But that hasn't stopped social media from running with it. And running fast. Because once race, replacement, and rejection get introduced into a celebrity breakup, the conversation stops being about love and starts being about power, optics, and humiliation. According to online chatter, things escalated when Aaron Pierre was allegedly spotted in public with a woman fans did not recognize. A woman who did not look like the type of partner people expected him to be linked to, especially given his recent public association with Teyana Taylor. No hand-holding photos, no confirmation, just sightings, whispers, and heavily edited clips spreading across timelines. And that's all it took. Suddenly, the narrative shifted. What was once framed as a mutual, quiet separation turned into a storyline of betrayal. Fans began asking uncomfortable questions. Was Teyana Taylor blindsided? Was she replaced? And why does it feel like this happened so fast? Then came the confrontation rumors. Multiple gossip pages began pushing the idea that Teyana Taylor allegedly confronted Aaron Pierre privately after learning about the new woman. Not publicly, not on social media, but directly. No screaming match caught on camera. No viral meltdown. Just a tense, closed-door moment where things that had been left unsaid finally surfaced. And that's where this gets complicated, because people who know Teyana Taylor's public pattern know one thing. She doesn't confront for attention, she confronts for clarity. Which is why fans aren't picturing a dramatic scene. They're picturing a controlled, emotionally loaded exchange where boundaries were drawn and narratives were corrected. But the internet didn't stop there. Once the phrase "dumped for a white woman" entered the discourse, the reaction became less about the relationship and more about symbolism. Comment sections filled with debates about desirability politics, industry bias, and whether successful black women are still expected to lose in romantic narratives, no matter how accomplished they are. Others pushed back hard, calling the storyline reckless and unfair to everyone involved, especially Teyana Taylor, who never confirmed being dumped, and Aaron Pierre, who never confirmed the new relationship. Still, the damage was done, because perception spreads faster than facts. What made this story explode wasn't evidence. It was silence. No immediate denial, no clarification, just distance. And in celebrity culture, distance invites interpretation. Fans began dissecting old interviews, body language, timelines. Every pause became suspicious. Every absence became intentional. And then came the most uncomfortable question of all. If Aaron Pierre did move on quickly, why does it feel like Teyana Taylor is the one being dissected instead of him? That question is what turned this from gossip into discourse. Some argue this is another example of how black women are scrutinized more harshly in public breakups. Others say people are projecting narratives that don't exist. And some believe the confrontation rumor itself is being exaggerated to fuel clicks. But here's the truth. Whether the claim is accurate or not, the reaction to it reveals something deeper about how audiences process celebrity relationships, especially when race, status, and silence intersect. And once those conversations start, they don't disappear quietly. So the real issue isn't whether Teyana Taylor confronted Aaron Pierre. It's why so many people need that confrontation to be real. Why the idea of her being left hits such a nerve. And why this story refuses to stay contained. Because according to what fans are noticing next, this isn't just about who Aaron Pierre may or may not be dating now. It's about how quickly narratives get rewritten when a woman stops controlling the story herself. And once you see what people are pointing out about the timing, the silence, and the shift in public perception, this situation starts to look a lot less simple. Before this story turned into a full-blown cultural debate, it started with something much smaller: silence. No announcement, no joint statement, no breakup post from Teyana Taylor or Pierre. Just distance. And in the age of constant access, silence doesn't feel neutral. It feels suspicious. Here's what is actually confirmed. There has been no public statement from either party confirming when or why the relationship ended. No verified source has stated that Pierre dumped Teyana Taylor, and no credible outlet has confirmed a new girlfriend, white or otherwise. That part matters because everything else grew from gaps, not facts. What is observable is behavior. Fans notice that appearances stopped abruptly. No overlapping events, no casual mentions, no subtle acknowledgements. That's typically the first sign a celebrity relationship has ended, but it doesn't tell us how or why. It only tells us the decision was already made. Now here's where assumption took over. The narrative escalated when Pierre was allegedly seen in public with a woman fans didn't recognize. No photos went viral showing intimacy. No confirmation of a date, just sightings and secondhand descriptions. Within hours, commentary pages framed the woman as his new partner, and within days, race became part of the headline. That's the moment the story shifted from breakup to symbolism. Online, the idea of Teyana Taylor being replaced, especially by a white woman, triggered a much larger emotional reaction than the breakup itself. For many commenters, this wasn't about two individuals. It was about a pattern they feel they've seen before: successful black women being sidelined, discarded, or traded up in public narratives. But here's the problem. There is no evidence that replacement happened at all, or no overlap timeline has been proven. No confirmation that Pierre ended the relationship for someone else. No indication that Teyana Taylor was blindsided. Those details were filled in by speculation, not reporting. The confrontation rumor followed naturally. Once the internet framed Teyana Taylor as being dumped, people expected a reaction. And when she didn't give one publicly, gossip pages supplied a private one instead. The idea that she allegedly confronted Pierre behind closed doors spread because it felt emotionally logical, not because it was confirmed. And to be fair, a private conversation after a breakup isn't shocking. It's normal. What turned it into a headline was the framing. Not that a conversation happened, but that it was fueled by humiliation and replacement. That framing is where things get distorted. People close to Teyana Taylor's public persona know she rarely reacts impulsively. When she addresses conflict, it's typically controlled, intentional, and off-camera. That's why fans who believe a confrontation happened don't imagine screaming or chaos. They imagine boundaries being set. But again, that's interpretation, not confirmation. What's most revealing is how quickly blame was assigned. Pierre became a symbol of betrayal. Teyana Taylor became a symbol of rejection. And the alleged white woman became a symbol of erasure, despite none of them confirming those roles. This is how narratives harden. Silence leaves space. Space invites projection. Projection becomes consensus. And once consensus forms online, it's treated like truth. Another important detail: Teyana Taylor never positioned herself as abandoned. She didn't post heartbreak content. She didn't hint at betrayal. She didn't lean into victimhood. That absence complicates the dumped storyline because people who feel blindsided usually signal it, even subtly. Instead, her behavior suggested pre-planning, emotional closure before public distance. That doesn't align with the image of someone being suddenly replaced. So why did the story stick? Because it taps into existing anxieties: race, gender, power, visibility. The idea that no matter how accomplished a black woman is, she can still be publicly left plays into a much bigger cultural fear. And stories that echo cultural fears spread faster than facts. At this point, the situation exists in two versions. One is real. Two adults ended a relationship quietly. Or the other is imagined. A dramatic rejection narrative layered with symbolism. And the danger of the second version is that it overshadows the first. Because if Teyana Taylor isn't telling this story, and Pierre isn't confirming it, then the loudest voice shaping perception isn't truth, it's interpretation. And that's where this gets even more complicated. Because according to what fans are starting to notice next, the way people reacted to this rumor says more about audience expectations than about what actually happened between them. By the time this story reached peak traction, it was no longer about a breakup. It had become a referendum on symbolism. The moment the phrase "dumped for a white woman" entered the discourse, the internet stopped asking what happened and started arguing over what it meant. And that shift explains why the reaction was so intense. To be clear, there is no verified confirmation that Pierre is dating anyone new, nor that race played any role in the end of his relationship with Teyana Taylor. But narratives don't need confirmation to spread when they echo long-standing cultural anxieties. For many viewers, the idea of replacement carried more weight than the breakup itself. Not because of the individuals involved, but because it tapped into a familiar storyline people believe they've seen before. A successful black woman achieving visibility and independence only to be framed as left once a man's status rises. Whether accurate or not, that story already lives in the collective imagination. That's why the reaction felt immediate and emotional. Comment sections quickly divided into two camps. One side rejected the narrative outright, calling it reckless, unfair, and rooted in projection. The other side leaned into it, not out of malice toward Teyana Taylor, but out of frustration with patterns they feel keep repeating. To them, the rumor wasn't gossip, it was confirmation of a broader issue. What's important to understand is that audience bias doesn't always come from prejudice. Sometimes it comes from experience. People bring their histories, disappointments, and observations into how they interpret celebrity stories. When a rumor aligns with those experiences, it feels true even without evidence. But here's where the bias becomes dangerous. Once race entered the narrative, Teyana Taylor's silence was reinterpreted as pain instead of intention, and her restraint was read as being dumped quietly rather than choosing not to engage. That assumption stripped her of agency and replaced it with a storyline where she became a symbol rather than a decision-maker. At the same time, Pierre was recast as a trope instead of a person, the man who levels up and leaves. That framing ignores the reality that relationships end for complex, often unglamorous reasons that don't fit viral captions. The third, often ignored casualty of this narrative is the unnamed woman herself. Reduced to a racial label, she became a prop in someone else's story without consent, confirmation, or context. That alone should raise red flags about how quickly online spaces flatten real people into symbols. Why did this stick so hard? Because silence invites interpretation. And audiences tend to fill silence with stories they already recognize. When Teyana Taylor didn't publicly frame the breakup, others framed it for her. And because she's a black woman with a history of being hyper-visible, people assumed vulnerability rather than autonomy. This reveals a deeper bias. We're more comfortable believing black women are hurt than believing they chose differently. Even when evidence points toward planning, boundaries, and forward movement, audiences often default to lost narratives because they feel more familiar. Another layer is timing. Teyana Taylor had already been transitioning toward privacy, legacy, and insulation from spectacle. That shift clashes with the expectation that celebrities owe the public emotional transparency. When she didn't provide it, the internet supplied drama instead. And drama sticks. What's also telling is how quickly the narrative overshadowed nuance. Very few conversations asked whether the relationship may have ended earlier than assumed, whether timelines overlapped, or whether both parties had already moved on. Those questions require patience. Viral stories don't. Instead, the discourse latched onto a single emotionally charged angle and amplified it until it felt definitive. But the strongest counterpoint to the rumor is behavior. Teyana Taylor hasn't acted like someone blindsided or humiliated. She hasn't reclaimed space, defended dignity, or corrected perception. All things people tend to do when they feel wronged publicly. Her approach suggests something else entirely: closure without spectacle. That's why many fans are now re-evaluating the initial outrage. They're asking whether the story says more about how audiences process race, desirability, and power than about what actually happened between two people. And that self-questioning is rare, but necessary. Because when narratives become mirrors for cultural frustration, truth often gets blurred. At this point, the white woman angle functions less as information and more as a lens, one that reveals how quickly we project meaning onto silence and how easily we turn individuals into symbols of systems they may not even be participating in. And that realization is forcing some viewers to pause. Because if the story was never about replacement, if it was about timing, alignment, and choice, then the outrage wasn't misplaced, but misdirected. Once the rumor cycle hit full speed, one question kept coming back louder than all the others. Did Teyana Taylor actually confront Pierre after the breakup? The short answer is this: there is no confirmed proof that a dramatic confrontation happened. The longer answer is more revealing. Because the way people imagine confrontation says more about expectations than reality. In celebrity gossip culture, confrontation often means chaos, raised voices, ultimatums, emotional explosions. But that image doesn't line up with Teyana Taylor's public pattern. When she draws boundaries, she doesn't do it for an audience, she does it to end confusion. That's why many fans who believe some form of conversation happened don't imagine a scene. They imagine closure, private, direct, final. Or it's also important to remember that most adult relationships end with a conversation. That alone isn't scandalous. What turned this into a headline was the implication that the conversation was fueled by humiliation or replacement, ideas that the internet layered on without evidence. Here's what we can reasonably infer from behavior alone. After the alleged dumped narrative spread, Teyana Taylor did not react in ways typical of someone seeking emotional validation or correction. She didn't post subliminals. She didn't allude to betrayal. She didn't reframe herself as wronged. Those absences matter. When people feel publicly disrespected, they often signal it, even subtly. Instead, her silence remained consistent. That consistency suggests one of two things. Either there was nothing new to process emotionally, or whatever processing needed to happen already did. Both point toward closure rather than confrontation. Fans who understand this distinction have begun reframing the rumor. Instead of asking, "Did she confront him?" they're asking, "Was there unfinished business at all?" And increasingly, the answer looks like no. Another clue lies in Pierre's behavior. He didn't respond defensively. He didn't counter the narrative. He didn't insert his own version of events. That restraint implies there wasn't an unresolved conflict pushing him to clarify. In public breakups where tension lingers, both parties often leak, directly or indirectly. That didn't happen here. So where did the confrontation rumor come from? From expectation. Audiences expected a reaction because the narrative framed Teyana Taylor as having been replaced. And replacement narratives demand response, at least emotionally. When none came, people filled the gap with a private confrontation to make the story feel complete. But closure doesn't always look like conflict. Sometimes it looks like distance that doesn't need explanation. There's also a cultural layer here. Many viewers project strength onto Teyana Taylor and expect her to stand up for herself publicly. But that expectation assumes confrontation is the only form of strength. In reality, choosing not to engage can be just as decisive. In fact, it often signals finality. If a conversation did happen, and again, that's unconfirmed, it likely wasn't about accusations. It would have been about clarity, about confirming that paths were diverging, about removing ambiguity so neither person lingered in the story longer than necessary. That kind of exchange doesn't produce drama. It produces quiet. And quiet is exactly what followed. What's also telling is how quickly the internet moved on to symbolic arguments once the confrontation rumor ran out of oxygen. Without new behavior to analyze, speculation shifted back to race, optics, and audience bias. That pivot suggests the confrontation angle was never supported by evidence. It was supported by desire for narrative symmetry. People wanted a scene because scenes feel satisfying, but real closure rarely does. Real closure looks like no overlap, no public emotion, no rewriting of history. Just two people exiting the same chapter without trying to control how outsiders interpret it. That's why this situation feels unresolved to some viewers. Not because it actually is, but because it denied them a familiar ending. There was no moment to latch onto, no clip to dissect, no quote to weaponize, just silence. And silence, especially from someone as expressive as Teyana Taylor, often means the conversation already happened where it mattered, privately. So whether a confrontation occurred or not, almost becomes irrelevant. The outcome suggests the same thing either way. Boundaries were set, and the door closed. Which leads to the final shift people are starting to notice. The story no longer centers on what happened between two people. It centers on why the public needed something explosive to believe it was over. And that need says more about us than about them. Now I want to hear from you. Do you think Teyana Taylor really confronted Pierre behind closed doors? Or do you believe this whole narrative was created by the internet because silence made people uncomfortable? And be honest, do you think the dumped for a white woman storyline is rooted in facts or in audience projection and bias? Drop your real thoughts in the comments. I'm reading all of them. If you made it this far, hit like. It lets the algorithm know you want real breakdowns, not lazy gossip. Make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications because stories like this don't end loudly. They evolve quietly, and when new details surface, you'll want to be here first. And remember, silence isn't always weakness. Sometimes, it's the loudest form of closure. I'll catch you in the next one.